Hi guys, Hannah here from HannahMariaPlans and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to take a look at my setup for April in my bullet journal. March was a really strange month for us all. Since my last video, most of the world has transitioned into lockdown because of COVID-19, and while some parts of my life have been more manic than ever, developing possible symptoms has sent me into isolation for 7 days. So things have also been, dare I say it, rather quiet. I'm not going to be discussing much about COVID-19 in this video because I personally like to use Plan With Me videos as an escape, but I have posted a few things over on my Instagram, which is linked below in case you're interested. In saying that, I of course hope that you're all safe and keeping busy with work, studying, spring cleaning, baking, painting, or whatever it is that you like to do. Alright then, moving on to our April cover page. As usual, I'm painting this on a separate piece of paper. I've been getting quite a few questions about why I do this, particularly as the Almanac journal paper is so good with water-based mediums, and I guess it's mainly because I like to keep the original painting. I actually have a folder of all my original paintings and another few clipped up on the wall behind my desk. Doing it separately also means that there won't be the dot from the dot grid showing through, so if I want to scan the painting to make prints or stickers, it's that much easier. Anyway, back to the painting itself. I've had this theme planned out for a few months and have been so excited to get started on it. It's based around some beautiful sunset skies with silhouettes of cities and urban landscapes. It's a much more simple theme in concept than my last one, but as you could see from the March flip through, I'm not very good at sticking to themes, so it may as well go off on a tangent by the end of the month. I decided that I really wanted a matte pastel look for the skies, so used gouache this month. If you don't know, gouache is a water-based paint that is thicker and more opaque than watercolour. It's often used in more illustrative paintings for its flat finish, and because of its opacity, you can layer lighter colours on top of darker paint. If I were to have painted the same sky in watercolour, I wouldn't have added any white paint. I'd have just allowed the white of the paper to show through, and would have added a lot more water to the orange and blue to make it as light as possible close to the middle. The finished result would probably have been more luminous and glowing, which is beautiful. I just didn't want that particular effect for this painting. I really struggle with drawing buildings because of the perspective. Silhouettes are so much easier because you can just draw the rough outline of a building, colour it in, and it looks surprisingly effective, particularly when you have a dramatic sky. I used black gouache on this particular page, but you'll see me using black markers later on. This is a technique where anything dark will do. After the painting was finished, I scanned it in and printed it out onto some matte paper so I could stick it in. If you've seen some of my other monthly setups, you might notice that I'm sticking it in on the opposite side to normal. I would usually have my cover page on the left and my calendar on the right, but decided to change things up for the first time in about a year and a half. I am so set in my bullet journaling ways that this felt really strange. I've now been using a bullet journal for nearly 5 years, and I think I have used 2 main calendar setups for that entire time. This is number 3 in 5 years. Oh wow, okay, swiftly moving on. I added the name of the month in the top right hand corner of the page and then started lettering in my chosen quote on the left. I wanted something that would be positive and uplifting with everything going on, but I also wanted it to fit my theme. When I found this one by Atticus, I knew it would be perfect. It reads, "That was her magic. She could still see the sunset even on those darkest days." For the calendar itself, I decided on a more minimal design inspired by the wonderful Manon from Dutch Dots. It has this strip up the right hand side where I originally planned to paint an extension of my cover page. Because of that, I'm just having to mix up some more of the colours I was using before. I actually only used 4 main colours throughout this entire setup, which is really unusual for me. I just enjoyed the way that this coral colour and the blue were working together so much. I'm using the Miya Art Jelly Cup Gouache set again, which has dried up a bit compared to when I got it, which is slightly disappointing, but it is still usable. The blue is made from the ultramarine-like colour with plenty of white and a little brown just to make it a bit less bright. The orange is made from a mixture of Winsor and Newton gouache, which is delightfully called Flesh Tint, the Miya Bright Red paint, and of course lots and lots of white. I'm not particularly great at blending in gouache, but the easiest way I have found is to work quickly so the paint stays wet, and to use quick strokes back and forth so you're mixing the colours a bit on the page. Although I originally intended this to follow on directly from my cover page, I got a bit distracted by the idea of painting in some blue mountains for a bit of contrast. Blue and orange are complementary colours, which means they are opposite each other on the colour wheel. Complementary colours can be used together to create contrast and tension, but I also find this combination of slightly more muted colours really soothing. I think blue and orange are my favourite combination of complementary colours for that reason. To finish off the painting, I added a few stars in the sky right at the very top and some dots of yellow and white in the city below to show the city lights shining out as the sun is setting. The layout I've chosen for the calendar is a minimal grid, where there are just lines and little numbers to separate out the days rather than a full grid. I absolutely adore the simplicity of this overall, and whilst there isn't so much going on in terms of events, it should give me plenty of space. I'm also planning on using this main calendar to schedule in my Instagram posts for the month, rather than having a separate specific layout. Next up is my spread for habit and project, which is mostly consistent compared to last time. My habits will be sitting on the left and my projects in the vertical Kanban board style on the right. I decided to add a bit of interest with this diagonal slice across the page, starting a little over halfway up on one side and a little under halfway on the other. My main inspiration for this particular illustration was the sun setting behind the skyline of Dubai with water glistening in the foreground. Now, I don't know about you, but I find water really hard to paint, particularly in gouache, as it's not really something I've done before. I wanted to have it so that where the sun would be hitting the water and reflecting off it, the colour would be lighter. So I left this area more orange with more white highlights. Away from the sun, I wanted the water to have more shades of blue in it. I could have added in some reflections of the skyline, but felt like it was looking messy enough as it was, and decided that as it was not looking particularly realistic anyway, that it wouldn't really matter. I made the fatal error of taping over the water with this lovely blue painter's masking tape, so that I could get a really crisp edge for the skyline itself. I used some lighter browns for the buildings around the sun to make it look like they were being lit up, but again just use a standard black for the rest. Of course, problems emerged when I tried to take the tape off of my painstakingly painted water. This tape is so much higher tack than I'm used to with washi tape, and because it had been coming off the white parts of the paper just fine, I didn't expect anything different over the paint. Oh, how wrong I was. I spent a good 5 minutes trying to peel off this tape without ripping the paper underneath, and as you can see, it did not work at all. I ended up painting back over the rips and was terrified that it was just going to bleed right through to the other side of the page. I think I managed to cover up the major rip pretty well in the end, and thankfully the rest of the tape pulled off without a hitch. I filled in the text using a black fineliner. As always, all materials used will be listed in the description box down below. I had to change up my habits a little, as 2 of them are normally based on doing things outside of the house. Of course, gyms and climbing centres have had to close, and because guidance is to not travel, climbing outside is not an option either. I've been trying to keep motivated with some home workouts, so lumped in a whole section just for exercise. The other tracker I added in was painting, and I mean to fill this one in when I manage to do some painting that specifically isn't in my bullet journal, so either following a Skillshare class or painting something else just for fun. Turning over the page, we can see that there has been no bleed through whatsoever. I am now entirely convinced that the paper in this journal can only be the product of magic. The next spread I set up was my to-do list. This hasn't changed at all since last month and is coping well with the number of tasks I have at the moment. Just like before, the orange is coming up from the bottom of the page, the blue coming down from the top, and they're each fading into the band of white that extends across the middle. This time I'm using a black Tombow dual brush pen to create the buildings at the bottom of the page. It lays down really nicely over the gouache without skipping and allows you to be quite precise with your lines, as well as having the brush tip which I use to colour in the larger areas. Of course, I didn't learn my lesson from the previous page and just went ahead and stuck that tape down without a care in the world. I had exactly the same problems, of course, when peeling it off again, and have some nice rips on the paper to show for it. On the next page, you'll actually see me pressing the tape onto my arm before putting it on the paper to help remove some of the stickiness. This helped a lot, and I recommend it for any tapes that are super sticky. I use the top section of this list for general bits and pieces and the bottom for art-specific things. The next spread is a new one for me, but I've seen it floating around the internet for quite a while. With everything that's been going on, I think a lot of people, myself included, have been seeking more positivity and reflecting on the things that they are grateful to have in their lives. I consider myself to be in a very privileged position of being healthy and living with my partner who's healthy, where we both have a stable income and can keep working either from home or myself in the hospital. Although I am still subject to the same restrictions as everybody else, I am still able to leave the house to go to work, which as somebody who loves their downtime but also gets antsy when they're cooped up inside is an amazing bit of relief. Whilst in isolation, I have suffered with feelings of being useless and wasted at home, which leaves me feeling anxious. When I'm at work, it feels like I'm at least able to take back a little control and autonomy for my actions in a way that helps the bigger picture. Because of all that, I decided it was time to implement a gratitude log. The idea is that you write in something you're grateful for each day. For example, today I'm grateful that we still have toilet roll. I'm joking, but seriously guys, stop stockpiling toilet roll. I am notoriously bad at keeping up with trackers on the daily, so we'll see at the end of the month if I even manage to fill it in. But hopefully I find it useful and it will be a ray of positivity to look back on when things are feeling bad. This spread is actually inspired by one of my favourite artists on Instagram, Caleb Sinchok, aka Art by Cinch. He works with a lot of gouache and watercolour, and this particular piece was developed from a bookmark he posted back in November, which I will link below. I definitely recommend checking out his work if you're not familiar with it. I'm adding in some more light from the distant city by just dotting in specks of white and yellow, rather than drawing any buildings this time, before colouring in the little strip where I'm going to write the dates on the right. Of course, the final spread in this video will be the first weekly of the month. I missed doing a Dutch door last month, so was keen enough to bring it back straight away. I marked a horizontal line about halfway down the page using pencil, and this will be what I use to cut along. My days of the week will sit along the top with a little tab to turn to the next page. This way, the illustration I paint at the bottom will carry across the whole week. I use a craft mat and craft knife because I find it much easier to be precise, but scissors could work as well. I'll leave a link to a previous video where I go into more detail on how I create a Dutch door. This painting is another that was inspired by Art by Cinch. I really like the way that the clouds sweep up and across the sky. It just feels so whimsical and romantic. It also gave me the opportunity to adjust my colours a little and introduce some more pinks and a little purple instead of the blue from this previous spreads. I tried to keep the base for the sky really smooth and then introduce these lines of different colours for the clouds themselves. For the skyline, I introduced a little bit more variation as well, rather than the solid black to make it a bit more multi-dimensional. I found I needed to use a teeny tiny brush for this part in order to get the detail that I wanted. This is the painting that I struggled with the most in the whole setup, but in the end I'm actually pretty happy with how it turned out. I have lots of ideas for my journal this month, and depending on how busy work becomes, I'll try to get a video out for each of my other weekly spreads. Of course, if that doesn't happen, then I hope you'll forgive me. I know this video is late again. I swear I always have the best intentions at getting it out on time. Although there are less social things happening at the moment, I still have a fairly chunky to-do list, and so have left a decent amount of space for each day. This also means that if any extra thoughts pop into my head, whether that's worries or little things I'd like to remember at this strange time, I will definitely have room for them. And there we have it. Whilst we're flipping through, I'd just like to take a moment to say thank you to everybody else in the world who is helping keeping everything turning, from supermarket workers to lorry drivers to our unsung healthcare heroes in the labs and cleaners keeping everything spotless. I wish I could list everybody here. You are appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you all next time. Bye guys.